The night my son told me to get out, 200 guests stopped breathing while the band kept pretending playing. I did not scream or beg. I lifted my chin, fixed my dress, and felt the keys burn my skin. People looked away the way decent people do when cruelty is tidy and music is paid in advance tonight. I walked out under lanterns we had hung together, drove home to the ranch, and locked the door behind memory. Do you know moment you stop being someone's mother and become an obstacle paperwork, a step between them and money? I learned it at a head table with a smile that never reached eyes and a whisper that poisoned love. At home house remembered me, the clock ticked like hoofbeats, the letter my husband wrote waited somewhere I couldn't find. Do not think I am fragile. I have buried a husband, birthed a ranch every morning, and paid merciless bill. But there are insults that do not bruise the skin. They bruise the past, and the past bleeds without bandages. So I brewed coffee, set the keys on the table and listened to the house, decide whether I should surrender. Outside the oak stood guard, inside the photographs watched. Somewhere a future I never chose, knocked with manicured knuckles hard. They wanted access all of it, because progress needs your keys, your silence, and preferably your guilt to run smoothly. Here's the truth I learned that night. Love without boundaries becomes a contract someone else writes in small print. If you stay with me, a single letter will surface, and every polite smile you've ever trusted will look dangerous. If you turn away now, remember this. The easiest way to erase a woman is to call her unreasonable. Stay for 2 minutes, and I will hand you the moment everything flipped, when a mother chose peace over permission forever. I am the bridegroom's mother, a widow who runs a 4-generation ranch. My name is Marion Cole, and tonight I wanted to look dignified, not dazzling. I ironed the linen I'd embroidered on sleepless nights, set centerpieces of white blooms from our garden, and laid out a royal blue dress my own mother wore to my wedding. It wasn't vanity, it was continuity. My son Grant the groom was the kind of boy who used to hold a ladder while I hung lights telling me our place was magic. I believed him, so I made it shine for his day. As the band tested their microphones and the lanterns warmed to gold, I clipped on a small chain around my neck the keys that have lived on my chest since my father's last warning. I checked the napkins, the seating chart, the cake. Then the room shifted a hush without music. I saw a whisper slide across a smile, and the night started to tilt. She stepped in with perfect posture and a measured smile. This is the fiancé, Sloan Mercer, polite, polished and fluent, in a language my house doesn't speak. Where I say home, she says asset. Where I say porch, she says square footage. Grant reached for her hand like a lifeline. I watched the change I'd felt for months become visible under the ballroom lights, the way he measured our life now not by seasons and calves and fences upright after a storm, but by projections and what-if decks. People will tell you that modern is only progress. They don't tell you what it costs to switch out a heart for a spreadsheet. Sloane's eyes moved over the tables the way a buyer scans a shelf. A small nod, a whisper I couldn't hear. My son's jaw locked. I knew that look from childhood, caught between wrong and admitting it. He took a step toward me. The music faltered. The room turned, waiting for a verdict. When my husband Henry died, the ranch did not. It woke even earlier and asked more of us. I learned to stretch $1 and a day. My son learned to stretch wire and hope. We became a team no one else could see, hands in the same mudbacks to the same wind. He'd sit beside me on the porch at sunset, coffee steaming, and promise someday my kids will run here like I did. That promise patched holes money couldn't reach. Grief makes clocks louder, but it also makes roots deeper. Folks brought casseroles and advice. Then the yard emptied, and it was just us and the oaks. We did not complain. We counted calves, not bank statements, and found a way. Years later, the porch still remembers his boots. The doorway still remembers his shoulders. I carried those memories into the ballroom tonight like quiet armor. Then I saw the look that said armor would be needed now. Before Henry, there was my father, old school tough soft hands only in prayer. He placed a key ring in my palm the week he felt himself failing. "Don't let anyone take this land from you," he said. "Not even someone you love." I laughed then. It sounded dramatic. He didn't. He lifted my hand to my collar, settled the chain around my neck, and told me land keeps a family honest when money tries to make them forget. I've worn those keys ever since through births and funerals, droughts, and bumper hay. Keys don't look like protection until someone asks for them. Then they weigh a mile. Tonight they rested against the blue dress, warm with my skin cold with memory, a small metal heartbeat. I thought they were a keepsake. I was wrong. In the hall a whisper finished its sentence, and my son turned toward me with a sentence that would change the shape of my name. I raised him here, Grant my boy my best foreman before he could grow a beard. He learned balance fixing fences, patience bottle-feeding runts, courage pulling a calf in bad weather. He learned to bargain at the auction, to shake a hand and keep his word even when it cost. Those lessons don't come from podcasts. They come from getting it wrong at sunrise and trying again by lunch. I taught him the columns in our ledger hay, vet, diesel forgiveness. He learned to tuck a blanket around my shoulders when the wind came hard. He told me the ranch made him a man. I believed it. Maybe that's why I didn't see the moment another world began tutoring him new mentors, new metrics, new gods that don't live outdoors. We had our rituals, coffee at dusk, counting blessings like fence posts. Tonight, I counted faces instead, searching his for the boy who used to keep count with me. He met her in the city, the kind of room where glass learns to glow, and everyone talks returns. She wore a fragrance with the confidence of someone who never lifted a feed sack, and shoes that don't know dirt. She spoke in clean lines, growth leverage position. I don't hate those words, I just know they never saved a sick calf. He came back different, still tender, but restless, bringing ideas I couldn't fold into my apron. "We could modernize," he said, and I heard the city in his throat. The city is not a villain, it's a spell. It promises relief from splinters and surprise bills. It promises to turn your life into a brand. He smiled the way men smile when they're proud of a woman who is proud of them. I smiled back, learning to nod, while a part of me took notes. Some storms start far away. You don't feel the rain, you just notice the barometer drop. When she first walked my hallway, the house held its breath. The photos of grandparents watched from nail-crooked frames, as if they too were curious. "Quaint," she said, the way folks say cute about a life they wouldn't survive. "Vintage," she added, as if history were a theme you could order online. Her eyes weren't cruel. They were busy pricing the mantel, measuring the dining room, subtracting the squeak from the stairs. She took pictures on her phone. I set out cobbler anyway. Hospitality isn't a trend, it's muscle memory. I asked if she liked the porch. She asked about parking. I asked if she heard the owls. She asked about Wi-Fi. It wasn't a fight. It was a translation failure. She wasn't wrong to want what she wants. I wasn't wrong to keep what keeps me. But somewhere between those two truths, a quiet line appeared across my table, and I knew someone would cross it soon. Think bigger, they said. Event space, weddings, retreats. The math wasn't crazy. A ranch can host joy as well as cattle. But there's a difference between welcoming people and surrendering the soul of a place. The plan needed access, full access, because profit hates locked doors. "It's still our home," I said, and the word "our" tasted different in my mouth and theirs. They were excited, beautiful in that excitement, certain that progress had come to rescue me from work I chose. I pictured strangers dancing on the porch where my husband kissed me goodnight. A DJ power outlet drilled into the wall my father plastered with his hands. "It's practical," they said. Practical is a good word. It doesn't hold you when you're tired. I asked for time to think. I set the keys on the table between us. They didn't touch them. They didn't have to. The room felt colder, like a window had opened no one could find. We didn't yell. We drifted. He came home later, sat less, scrolled more. I talked to the photographs after he left the way older women do when they're trying not to talk to the walls. The clock grew louder, then meaner the way a clock can when it counts not minutes but distances. I tried a cheaper roast, a different cobbler spice, new oil in the tractor. Small repairs, old hope. He tried patience. I could feel it, the kind a son uses when he thinks his mother needs to catch up. Maybe I did, but catching up to what my own erasure. One night I passed the mirror and saw the keys lying bright against my throat, like a question I hadn't answered. That was the moment I realized love can be loyal and still get lost. He looked at me across the room. I looked back. No words, just the sound of something hairline and important giving way. The phone rang before coffee cooled. "Can you bring me the keys just to make a few updates?" Grant used his careful voice, the one he saved for bad news and big asks. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stared at the chain against my collarbone. Updates for what I asked. He mentioned contractors' estimates, timelines. No mention of family dinners or sunsets on the porch, just estimates. If you've ever been asked for something small that carries everything big inside it, you know the weight. The house seemed to lean in listening. I could hear cattle shifting in the distance, that steady, low murmur that says stand. I said I'd think about it. He exhaled like he'd scored. After we hung up, the clock ticked faster. The coffee tasted burned. On the table, my keys didn't jingle. They glared. I realized this wasn't about repairs. It was about permission. People think a will is about money. Ours is about memory and judgment. Before he died, Henry met with our lawyer, Arthur Whitaker, and wrote it, "Simple, I hold full authority over the ranch during my lifetime and clear mind. My son's share exists, but it becomes real when I decide he's ready." That wasn't punishment. It was trust in my timing shaped by seasons, not sales. I reread the documents that night, like a recipe I could make by heart, but still double-check. If you've ever kept a promise to someone you loved more than breath, you understand the quiet that follows. I laid the papers beside the keys, two small shields, against a storm I could now name. When the phone buzzed again, I didn't answer. I needed my own voice first. The will didn't lock a door. It gave me the right to choose who enters. We finally spoke in the driveway, dust lifting around our shoes. He said I was stuck in the past, living like Henry might pull up. Tomorrow and ask what's for supper. I didn't argue. Grief is a room you can clean and still smell. I'm not asking to sell, he said, just to move us forward. I know that tone, grown children, negotiating with the history that raised them. I heard the plea under the pitch. Make my life easier. Part of me wanted to. I remember his skinned knees, his cold hands after morning chores, the boy who promised me he'd never leave the land. The other part of me heard my father, not even someone you love. The wind lifted my hair. I hear you, I said, but I also hear him. His face fell. Sometimes truth doesn't crush, it quietly cracks. I set a boundary the way older women do, when they plan to keep it plain, words steady tone, no extra sentences to negotiate later. The keys stay with me until you earn them, I said. He stared at my hands, not my eyes, then smiled a little, like we were still playing. But we weren't. Boundaries are a form of love that people only recognize when they test them. He tried again, softer, the way a son asks a favor. I held the same line softer too, but unmoved. I've learned this: if you change your answer to keep the peace, you only postpone the war. He left with a tight hug and a tighter jaw. I watched his taillights vanish down the dirt road we'd graded together. The porch light stayed on. I kept it on for me. The night was very quiet. Lines make silence louder. When I'm unsure, I walk the house. I ran my fingers along the adobe walls, felt the cool history pressed into them by hands I loved. The wedding portrait still leans a little. I never fixed it on purpose. The kitchen window still whistles when the wind is right. I kept that too. This place holds our arguments without echo, and our laughter without bragging. I opened Henry's study, breathed leather and paper, that good clean smell of a man who wrote things down. I thought of how older folks walk their gardens, before hard frost touching leaves, checking fences, saying quiet goodbyes just in case. When I reached the front hall, my neck felt lighter. I'd forgotten I'd tucked the keys into my pocket. I put them back on. The chain cooled my skin, then warmed. Houses don't talk. They witness. Mine asked me not to flinch. I made coffee and asked the question I never thought I'd ask. Have you ever trusted someone you love and felt the floor tilt anyway? If you're watching from a kitchen like mine with a calendar full of doctor visits and birthdays, you've been here. You keep faith and keep receipts. Leave a note with your city, tell me where you learned your lesson and what it cost. As the comments come, we become a long table, passing stories like bread. That morning I needed other kitchens, other clocks. I needed proof that women older than me had crossed this river and kept their dignity dry. The mug cooled in my hands, the sun climbed, the phone buzzed again. I turned the volume down and decided to try something he couldn't dismiss as stubbornness. I would not shout from a porch, I would set a table. I called and invited them to dinner. Pot roast green beans, the apple cobbler he always loved. Hospitality is my first language, and I wanted to speak it clearly. Let's start over, I said, and I meant it. Older folks know this a meal can lower shoulders better than a speech. I polished the good fork, set the tablecloth I stitched decades ago, and wore a simple dress that wouldn't distract or offend. The house glowed like it used to on birthdays. When their truck pulled up, my heart moved the way it does when you see your child first thing in the morning, hopeful before the day has a chance to ruin it. He kissed my cheek. She complimented the smell. For a moment, we were three people doing a normal thing. Then I saw her phone in her hand like a second guest. I decided to pay attention. We ate, we smiled. We said all the sentences families say when they are trying to behave. This is delicious. How's work? We should do this more. I watched her eyes scan the crown, molding the rugs, the frame around Henry's photograph. Authentic, she said, the way magazines do. She took small bites, checked her phone twice, and excused herself to the restroom with a practiced smile. Grant told a story about their apartment and laughed, but his shoulders stayed high. I poured tea and kept my face soft. If you've hosted adults who are nervous around you, you know the choreography. Everyone careful, nobody honest. The clock ticked too loud. When I carried the cobbler out, the hallway was empty. No sound from the bathroom. A draft rippled the runner. Old houses can tell you where a person has gone by the way they take the air with them. I followed the draft. She was in Henry's study, back-turned phone-raised camera, pointed at the desk, and the drawers pulled just enough to show they could be pulled. "Oh," she said when she saw me, "this room is fascinating." I smiled the way women smile when they're filing details for later. "It's usually locked," I said. She mentioned the door was open. It hadn't been. I closed the drawers gently, like tucking in a child. She slipped the phone into her bag, complimented the wood grain, the vintage vibe. I nodded and led her back down the hall. We finished dessert, our voices too bright. When they left, I watched their taillights and listened for the sound the house makes when it relaxes after strangers go. It didn't relax. Something had been opened that shouldn't be. I walked back to the study and slid the drawer again smooth. Something was missing. I wasn't sure what yet. I would be soon. I keep the important things in plain sight, disguised as clutter ledger's warranty. Ends. A church program with a note from Henry, but the yellow envelope had its own place, tucked under the blotter where he'd left it. It wasn't there. Deeds remained. Titles, too. The one thing that felt like a fuse, gone. I checked beneath books behind frames inside the old dictionary where we hid birthday money. Nothing. If you ever felt your mouth go dry while your mind stayed calm, you know the feeling. I touched the keys for steadiness and sat in his chair. The leather sighed like it remembered his weight. I could almost hear him, "Don't panic, prepare." I turned off the lamp and stared out at the porch. Someone had come here not to admire but to assess, not to visit but to test locks. The envelope was small, its absence was not. The next day the house felt watched. I moved through rooms the way you do after a scare alert to windows listening for a strange car. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. I remembered the tone in that dinner proposal, the way access had been the real subject disguised as opportunity. I wasn't a mother or a widow in that plan. I was a gate. Gates are useful until they don't open on command. Then they're a problem. I stood in the hallway where the family photos climb the wall and thought about women who hold the hinge on their families. People praise them until a hinge squeaks. Then they reach for oil or a replacement. I decided I would rather squeak than be replaced. I made a list lawyer safe deposit box doctor. I brewed strong coffee and sharpened a pencil. The envelope was gone. My resolve wasn't. Arthur arrived with the gravity good lawyers carry, steady shoes, steady eyes. He listened to my story without interrupting, then said the sentence that changed my strategy. The law protects property, Marion. It does not protect feelings. He wasn't unkind. He was precise. He explained how families argue in court numbers, not tears, and how numbers can be arranged to look like neglect, even when a place is spotless. He warned me about pressure tactics dressed as concern and about professionals who might call me confused when I am simply consistent. Older viewers will know this. Sometimes you need someone who isn't scared to say the hard word out loud. Prepare, he said, quietly. We planned the next steps and sipped coffee that had gone cold while he talked. When he stood to leave, he touched the keys at my collarbone with his eyes, not his hand. Keep those, he said. They mean more than metal. That afternoon, a thought slid under my door. What if they try to say I'm not fit to decide, Arthur had warned me. Guardianship petitions, evaluations, the way a diagnosis can be stretched by the willing. I am clear as a bell, but I've seen sharp women erased by paperwork and a nod. I wrote down everything, dates, times, exactly who said what. I called my doctor and scheduled a full workup, memory, cognition, all of it. Not because I doubted myself, because I knew others might pretend to. If you're over 50, you've felt it the way some people talk around you like your furniture. I wouldn't give them that script. As evening fell, I stood at the sink and watched the light leave the fields. I felt old and brand new at the same time. Older in bones, new in resolve. Let them test me. I would arrive early and bring a pen. I made copies of everything deeds, insurance, Henry's letters. I placed them in labeled folders the way nurses set out instruments before surgery. I rented a safe deposit box in town and left a decoy folder at home with nothing but appliance manuals. I changed the hiding place of the spare key. I told no one. This is how older women fight without looking like fighters. We tidy. We go to the bank. We put on lipstick for appointments that scare us. At night I walked the porch and let the oaks lend me their posture. The house creaked in all the same places, not plotting, just old. I slept lightly and woke early like I used to when my boy was small and had a fever. Only this time, the fever belonged to a plan, not mine. In the morning, I packed a small bag with the folders and drove into town. Preparation is mercy. She invited me to lunch at the ranch restaurant. The irony didn't miss either of us. I arrived early and chose a table by the window. She came with a bright smile and her phone set face down like a promise she might keep. We ordered water and small talk. Then she leaned in and described a partnership they manage. Everything I contribute, the property we split profits, and I rest. I asked about access. She said full as if the word were harmless. I asked where I would live. She said I could pick anywhere, an apartment with elevators, no stairs. She meant comfort. I heard exile. She called it practical. I called it erasing the last map that has my name on it. I placed a palm over the keys under my blouse. I'm not your obstacle, I said. I'm the door. Her smile flickered. Sometimes the simplest sentence flips the table. She tried a softer angle, concern. At your age, you shouldn't be doing this alone, she said. The words were smooth, the way medication is sweetened for children. I've shoveled snow in February, dragged hoses in August, and paid bills in months when a calf died and the truck broke. I am not fragile, but I am not stupid either. Age becomes a crowbar if you let it. I set my napkin down and told her the ranch isn't just valuable. It's sacred, and sacred things don't go on sale because someone is tired. You're temporary. I said not to be cruel, but to be clear. Seasons change, people leave, the land endures. She didn't argue. She simply noted my answer, the way a person notes a code to a locked gate they plan to revisit. We left money on the table. We did not hug. Outside, the wind came up. Some days it does that. Right before a storm. That night, Grant called from the truck, voice low, like someone speaking in a church he doesn't attend anymore. He said he was stuck between me and her, that he needed stability, that I was making things hard. I heard the fatigue in him, the way men get tired when love feels like a math problem. I reminded him the ranch has been stable through wars and recessions, through funerals and hail. He reminded me that bills are due next month, not in the glow of our memories. We both had a point. Love complicates points. I don't want to fight you, he said. Then don't. I answered. Silence ran long enough to bruise. He wanted me to fold without calling it folding. I wanted him to stand without calling it rebellion. We hung up gently. Some goodbyes have manners. My throat burned anyway. They arrived at noon, 2 men in careful suits, briefcases blunt as hammers. Grant stood by the window, eyes on the pasture, like the sky might offer a teleprompter. The attorneys spoke in tidy phrases: asset protection, market value, fiduciary duty. They didn't sneer. They didn't need to. They laid out charts and a proposal for division. Veiled as fairness. I poured tea and kept my hands still. Older women know how to be polite while their spines harden. I asked if love factored anywhere in their math. They smiled like I'd told a child's joke. They cited a clause about deterioration of value. I cited one about administrative control. We both knew which judge would be easier to find. When they finished, the house felt crowded with words that didn't belong to us. I walked them to the door. On the threshold, I realized they hadn't come to persuade. They'd come to warn. Before they left, she placed a hand on her belly and said quietly, "I'm pregnant." The room changed temperature. My son finally met my eyes. "You'll be a grandmother," he said, hope, breaking through the fog like a porch light at dawn. I swallowed hard. Children are not leverage, but I could feel the calculation in the air. College funds, bedrooms, futures conjured out of square footage. I stood and hugged them both with the gentleness I reserve for newborn lambs. "Congratulations," I said, and meant it. Then I reached for the keys and held them at my heart. "These stay with me." Tears rose but didn't fall. If you've ever chosen the right thing and hated the timing, you understand. Love is not a coupon you redeem by surrendering what keeps you whole. They left with promises and threats braided together. The house kept my balance. I held the rail and breathed. A week later, the storm broke inside my living room. He wanted the keys. I offered coffee. He wanted movement. I offered a chair. He raised his voice. I lowered mine. "These keys are your past," I said finally, "not your future." It was the truest sentence I had. He stared at me, like a man looking into a mirror he didn't ask for. "Then we're done," he said. "We'll go to court." I heard the child he used to be, scared and angry, hiding in his chest. I wanted to pull him out and put him at my kitchen table with cocoa and the good spoon. Instead, I nodded. Some love requires a signature. He left with the lawyers with promises to resolve and expedite. When the door shut, the silence felt like snow. I sat down slowly, like a woman setting a heavy box on a shelf. Then I went to find the letter. When the door shut, I finally let myself cry. Not the pretty tears people dab at, but the kind that make your shoulders shake. I cried for the porch light, still burning, for the boy who used to bring me wildflowers, for the woman I used to be, before lawyers learned my name. Then I washed my face the way older women do. Cool water, slow breath towel pressed firm until the heat leaves. I set the kettle on and watched the blue flame steady. Calm is a choice, and that night I chose it like medicine. I straightened the stack of envelopes that didn't need straightening. I picked up the keys, kissed them, and laid them down as if blessing a soldier before battle. The clock ticked without malice. Outside, the oaks didn't flinch. I whispered, "Stand." When the phone rang again, I didn't run. I let it sing to the end. Then headlights turned into the yard. Arthur Whitaker doesn't arrive after dark unless the news can't wait. He stepped in without ceremony coat, still buttoned eyes kind but urgent. I found something, he said, lifting a worn manila envelope like a fragile bird. A copy I made years ago he never knew. I kept it because I had a feeling you might need it. He meant Henry, my husband. I held the envelope with both hands. It felt warm from his car and important from God. We sat at the kitchen table we've used for funerals and birthdays, and he slid out a single yellowed sheet with familiar handwriting. In the hush, I heard the stove tick as it cooled, and my own breath count the lines. Arthur didn't speak again. Good lawyers know when silence does the work. I traced the first sentence with a finger that had shelled 1,000 peas. If you are reading this, it began, "Someone is trying to take our home." I read out loud so the walls could witness, "My love, if anyone makes you feel old or less, resist. If they call you unreasonable, remember your reason. If they ask for keys, remember keys are choices." My voice grew steadier with each word. "You are not a gatekeeper to be pitied. You are the door. You decide who enters." I paused and closed my eyes. I could smell his shaving soap, hear the small rattle he made in his pockets for the dog. I felt the exact weight of his palm between my shoulders, the way he settled me when storms found our roof. He knew this moment would come. He wrote to meet me inside it. I looked at Arthur, who watched me like a chaplain watches the living become braver. "Keep reading," he said softly. The kettle began to murmur as if the house itself agreed. I turned the page edge with care and kept going. 2 months ago, the letter continued. I met a man at the hospital who signed away his home when illness made him tired. He thought he was granting help. He was granting exit. The story rolled out plain: a son loved by a father, a spouse who spoke fluently in improvements, a signature given in trust, a life boxed up. It wasn't my son who betrayed me. The man had told Henry it was my manipulated son. Words simple enough for a pastor's sermon, sharp enough for a courtroom. I don't write this because I distrust our boy. Henry added, but because I trust you. Guard the land, guard yourself. If love demands keys to prove itself, love is not the thing it claims to be. I set the page down, heart ringing like metal on metal. Arthur poured tea we forgot to drink. The past didn't feel like nostalgia anymore. It felt like orders. Some duties you're born into, some you accept because no one else can carry them. That night, I accepted mine out loud so my father and Henry could hear I am the keeper of this history, not a slogan, an assignment. I thought of the women in our family who baked when they had no flour, who stitched when they had no thread, who said no when the world preferred yes. My job wasn't to win arguments or convert anyone. My job was to hold the line without hating the people pushing it. The tea went cold. I drank it anyway. Arthur nodded like a man satisfied a bridge would hold. I folded the letter, kissed the crease, and slid it back into its old envelope that felt new again. If you've ever felt purpose drop into your hands like a newborn, and a hammer at the same time, you know the mix, tenderness and steel. We moved like nurses in an operating room, slow, exact, no wasted motion. I placed the letter in Henry's safe behind his father's portrait, then photographed every page, each corner, the envelope itself. Arthur watched, then suggested a second layer. A safe deposit box in town, not logged under my name alone. We drafted a list of what belongs where. Originals here, copies there, decoys in the drawer. For anyone searching with greedy hands, but poor patience. Older adults know this ritual, wills wrapped in plastic certificates between cookbooks, life reduced to paper and protected by habit. After Arthur left, I drove to the bank with a small folder under my coat and a larger prayer under my ribs. I signed my name to a steel box the size of a loaf pan. When it clicked shut, I realized I'd just moved our marriage and our future into a slot guarded by time. Next came the doctor, the good one who sees you as a person, not a chart. I asked for everything: blood work, cognitive screen, memory tests. The alphabet backward, if she needed it. She smiled and said, "Let's get you the paper you need." Older viewers will understand why I asked. People can mistake conviction for confusion when your hair turns silver. The tests were boring. Then oddly fun a scavenger hunt through my own head. We laughed when I beat her timer by a mile. "Write it down," I said more firmly than I meant. She did, clear language, signed, dated, stamped. On the way out, I bought a pack of peppermints, like my mother used to keep in her purse for long drives. Back home, I slid the certificate into a plastic sleeve and labeled it in big letters. I didn't feel defensive. I felt armored. Let them come softly. I was ready softly. At the dining table, I laid out folders like place settings, deeds, tax receipts, ranch maintenance logs, photos of repairs we made. After last winter's ice, every check I'd written for feed or a neighbor's fence. I built a timeline with dates and little notes. Only I would understand the storm that blew the mailbox, the calf with the white star, the day he brought her to see the porch. This wasn't busy work. It was a map a judge could follow, and a map I could stand on without wobbling. Between pages, I tucked short prayers steady, kind, fair, because I know how easy it is to become hard when you feel cornered. I sealed a copy set for Arthur and left another for the bank box. Then I cleared the table and set it again for supper, because life is both the fight and the soup. I slept well for the first time in weeks. I woke before dawn and brewed chamomile instead of coffee. The house had my rhythm again. The clock still ticked, but to me, not at me. I swept the porch and listened to the morning settle doves somewhere in the cottonwood, the distant complaint of a tractor that needs a belt. The first light mild as milk. I wasn't naive. Paper wars were coming. But panic had left the room, and with it the urge to argue every sentence I'd heard. You reach a certain age and learn that silence can be useful as a pocket knife. I held the keys and felt them as tools instead of trophies. The phone buzzed. I let it. The mailbox clanged. I finished my tea. When I finally opened the door, there was nothing but local coupons and a church newsletter. I smiled. Not every knock is a crisis. Some are just the world reminding you it still turns. Before we step into what comes next, I want to ask you something plain. If someone you love offered comfort in exchange for your peace, if they called it practical, sensible, the modern way, would you trade? Many of you watching have buried parents, raised children, kept houses standing when nobody thanked you. You know the price of surrender. Tell me your city and the lesson that taught you to hold your line. Your words might become a handrail for someone else. As for me, the letter is safe. The doctor has signed my name clear, and the timeline waits like a row of soldiers. The keys rest where they've always rested, at my throat, not his. The storm will test every board we've nailed. That's all right. This house has outlived worse. Take a breath. Settle your back. When the knock comes again, and it will, I'll be ready. Stay with me. The next knock is louder. The envelope came certified, thick enough to feel like a shove. Petition for partition, forced division, deterioration of value. I set it on the table like a hot pan and let the words cool. The argument was tidy, my home was underperforming, sentiment was waste. They listed square footage comps projections. They did not list the rooster who wakes us, the tree that holds our storms, or the way this porch steadies a man. I called Arthur. He said we expected this. Breathe. I did. Then I sharpened a pencil and wrote the first line of my response. This property is maintained, documented, and loved. Older folks know that love is not a defense in court, but it can be a spine. I stacked my timeline beside their math until the pile stood even. When I slid the papers back into the envelope, my hands had stopped shaking. They wanted a fight. They were getting a record. I locked the door. I met Arthur at his office, where the walls smell like ink and quiet decisions. I want a plan that protects the ranch, even if I'm tired or gone, I said. We drafted a trust that could hold the land steady for 50 years if needed, like a fence line built for hard winters. The trust was plain English, no sale, no split, no remodel without the kind of consent that cannot be bullied. It named successors who know a tractor's second gear and a ledger's first law tell the truth. I initialed every page, slow and careful, the way you plant posts dead straight. If you've ever put your name on something you meant to keep, you know the weight and the relief. I paused over the signature line and pictured the porch at dusk. The glow only this house makes. Then I signed, the notary stamped, the seal clicked like a gate. A new guard took his station. We added hard clauses clear enough to survive bright lawyers and dim motives. If my son pursued a sale or leveraged the land for cash, his share would lock. If he honored the place, he'd receive profits from culture education or history events. Things that teach, not strip. We named a foundation as a backstop if all else failed. I could feel people judging me in advance, harsh for a mother. But mothers older than me will understand. There is firmness that comes from fear and firmness that comes from love. Mine was the second kind. I did not slam a door. I set a code. Are you sure? Arthur asked, as every good lawyer must. Yes, I said, a little hoarse. He slid the final page across the desk. I dated it in my best handwriting, like a birthday card for the house. The stamp fell again. In that click, something inside me settled. I had chosen peace with teeth. He called after midnight, voice ragged with a bottle and a bruise you can't see. You took my inheritance, he said, words stumbling over each other to get out. I listened to the boy in him, not the man barking. I said his name the way mothers say it when they're remembering all 3 syllables of a newborn cry. I protected it, I answered, and I protected you from yourself. He laughed the way a fence laughs in wind, sharp and pained. You made me the villain. No, I said, you're a man standing in a doorway you don't recognize. Step back, breathe. Silence traveled the wire a long time. I pictured him in the dark, the room leaning the future, smaller than the bottle cap in his hand. Good night, I said, and set the phone down, like laying a fevered head on a cool pillow. Love stayed awake. The house did too. I watched the sky pale. The next morning I made oatmeal the way Henry liked it, salt first, then sugar, because calm sometimes needs muscle memory. I replayed the call and refused to rehearse new hurts. You taught him to be strong, I told myself. Let him practice. I walked the fence line, counted boards, and decided not to argue with shadows. Peace isn't passive, it's a discipline. It means answering only the door you mean to open. Arthur texted to say filings had been received. We were in motion. I printed the doctor's letter and paperclipped it to the trust. I put on lipstick to go nowhere the way older women do when they need their face to remind their heart. At noon I brewed tea and sat very still. The house breathed, the oaks held. I thought of grandmothers who kept families alive with nothing but prayers and pantry tricks. Do that, I told myself. Feed what's good, lock what's not. Lawsuits are slow, chores are not. I trimmed the roses back to honest wood scraped and painted the porch rail, fixed the sag in the screen door. That's annoyed me for years. I fed the chickens, thanked them for eggs like little sons, and stacked a cord of wood with the neatness of a school teacher. You can't litigate a sunset. You can only watch it perform its old miracle. I did every evening, coffee in hand. The cup warm even when the air went blue. Work produces the kind of tired that makes sleep gentle, not numb. If you've ever ended a hard day with a clean floor and a quiet house, you know that medicine. Sometimes I caught myself looking down the road for a truck that didn't come. I didn't scold the part of me that waited. I let her look. Then I went inside and folded towels like a woman preparing for company. Time stretched, then tucked itself in. Court dates moved like clouds. Motions filed, answered, filed again. The trust held like a good post in clay soil. We won small things that mattered, a judge's frown at their deterioration. Claim a nod at my maintenance logs the way Photographs can testify without sighing. Through it all, I lived a life. I learned the new calf's pattern, planted tomatoes too late, and got lucky, danced with the radio when a storm missed us by a mile. Older adults know this rhythm: hospital visits on Tuesday, laughter on Wednesday, weeds on Thursday. The world does not pause for your lawsuit or your grief. It keeps the time your heart forgets. When I checked the mailbox one fall afternoon and found nothing but coupons, I laughed out loud. Not every day brings a headline. Some days bring coupons and mercy. I put both on the counter and started supper. News travels in towns like ours on back porches, in checkout lines whispered over cantaloupes. She left, someone said. Dallas, someone added. Full custody, papers signed. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the hollowness of a ladder set against the wrong wall. It turns out there's no warranty on a marriage sold on future returns. People asked if I'd seen the baby. I hadn't. I learned to answer kindly and then change the subject to weather recipes, the price of feed. In the quiet, I pictured my grandchild's face and prayed a grandmother's basic prayer: safety, softness, sleep. I also prayed for the woman who hurt us. That surprised me. It shouldn't have. You reach a certain age and realize resentment is a mortgage you pay forever. I would not live there. I set another place at the table in my mind and left the door unlocked. Some prodigals are small. I saw her once at a restaurant in town. Perfect hair, a dress sharp enough to cut paper a man with watch face money. She laughed like bells. The waiter hovered. For a moment, I saw the life she'd wanted me to envy: glossy, curated, efficient. Then she took off her sunglasses, and the part behind her eyes told the truth. Fast, hungry, tired. We made eye contact. She waved as if we were friendly, and I nodded like you do when you don't want to toss gasoline on dry grass. The man ordered more wine. She scrolled her phone. I finished my errand and drove home to a porch that didn't need me to perform for it. People can live in mansions and still require applause to sleep. On the drive, I realized I hadn't clenched my jaw once. Peace has side effects. You stop practicing speeches for people who won't hear them. Their world-produced photographs, pregnant sunsets on balconies, staged brunches, a baby posed like a postcard. My world-produced morning's mud on boots, coffee you can't stage, the sound of a rooster that doesn't care about angles. I clicked through a few images, once curious, then put the phone down and went outside where the real light lives. I don't hate pretty. I just know it won't hold you at 2 a.m. when the past knocks. Peace will. That's what I chose: not winning, not revenge, but a settled house and a settled heart. Arthur called that week to say the case had stalled again. The trust was too clean. You did good work, he said. I thanked him and watched the sun sink behind the cottonwoods. A show older than my last name. Somewhere in the city, cameras flash. Here, crickets start. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let the evening close like a soft book. At 6 a.m., the knock sounded like old news returning. I opened the door, and there he was. Thinner eyes swollen, a little boy hiding inside a grown man's bones. I'm sorry, he said, and the words fogged in the cool air like breath on glass. I didn't make a speech. I reached for him the way mothers do when they stop keeping score. His shoulders collapsed into my apron, and we stood there, two people on a doormat, with years between us, and none at all. I smelled engine oil and last night's regret. I heard a meadowlark start the day. Come in, I said, and he stepped over the threshold like it might break. I poured coffee, added sugar without asking, and slid the cup across the table we used to share at homework time. He stared at his hands. I lost everything, he whispered, not everything, I answered, and set a second mug down. Mine. We didn't fix each other with sentences. We went outside. The fence had sagged again near the east pasture, so we hauled posts and tamped earth the way we used to, one board at a time, one breath at a time. He kept his eyes on the level. I kept mine on the horizon. Work is the language older people trust. Reliable, honest, no flourishes. We fed the chickens, listened to their fussy gratitude, and checked the trough. By late afternoon, the fence stood truer than we did. He leaned on the post hole digger and tried to say a big apology. I touched his sleeve. "Tomorrow," I said, "let's let the day do its part." At sunset, we sat shoulder to shoulder, two silhouettes the porch had held before. He tilted his head to the sky and exhaled. I didn't hug him again. I let the quiet hug us both until the crickets took shift. Something unclenched. All day I wore the keys as I always do. I did not touch them. I didn't need to. He looked at them once, then looked away, not in anger anymore, but in understanding, like a man passing a gate he knows he can open only when he's ready to pay for the pasture he'll enter. We put tools back where they belong. He wiped his boots at the threshold he once stomped. Inside, he washed dishes without asking and dried them to the last glass. We didn't talk about the lawsuit, the trust, the threats. Those belonged to yesterday's weather. We talked about the tractor coughing at start the neighbor's heifer due. Any minute whether the pecan tree needs a trim. Around 9, he paused at the doorway like a boy again. "I'll be here in the morning," he said. "So will I." I answered. He nodded at the keys with his eyes, not his hands. Agreement signed. A week later, I met him the small reason storms sometimes pass. He ran toward the porch with that tumbling baby gait and a laugh that didn't know anything about court dates or broken vows. "Grandma," he tried, and it came out like music that remembered my name before I taught it. I knelt. He smelled like crackers and sunshine, the clean perfume of children and laundry lines. We fed the chickens together. He shrieked when a hen scolded us, then clapped like we'd been applauded. I made cocoa not too hot and cut the sandwich in triangles, because some hospitality is sacred geometry. At nap time, he slept on my chest, the way his father once did. Heavy, trusting, absolute. I didn't cry. I breathed in time with a future that still wanted us. When his little hand closed around one of my fingers, I knew what I'd been guarding all along was not dirt. It was lineage alive. The next morning, my son cleared his throat the way men do when they decide to be brave. "I'm withdrawing the suit," he said, eyes steady. "I'll call Arthur today." I nodded and said nothing that would make it harder. Some victories need to be carried, not celebrated. He dialed at the kitchen table. I stirred oatmeal and watched the steam signal a ceasefire. Arthur answered with relief and instructions. Papers would be filed. Calendars cleared, the long, slow undoing of a bad idea. After the call, we stood in the doorway and watched the wind move through the cottonwoods like a choir. "Thank you," he said, "for not throwing me away." I touched his cheek the way I used to check for fever. "You're not trash," I said. "You're timber. You needed seasoning." He laughed then, first time in months. It sounded like a nail finally seated flush. The house relaxed, so did I. When the dust settled, I drove to town in my good sweater and signed one last document. It was simple. The ranch would be his someday. If he proved for 10 straight years, he could keep it whole, no selling, no carving. No glitter where the grain should show. If he failed, it would pass to the little boy when he turned 25, because sometimes love skips a generation to hit its target. I initialed each clause and pictured the porch at dawn, the only judge that has ever mattered to me. "Back home," I told him. He didn't puff up or sulk. He just nodded, understanding that an inheritance can be a mirror you have to face each morning. "I'll earn it," he said. I believed him and didn't promise it. That night we ate stew and cornbread, and I slept like people sleep who have set their house in order. My dreams smelled like fresh-cut hay. A few days later, while we trimmed the hedges, he set the clippers down and spoke without armor. "I thought the keys were about control," he said. "Turns out they were about keeping me from becoming a man I wouldn't respect." I didn't answer right away. I let the truth ring. Then I told him what Henry wrote. "You are the door." He nodded, eyes wet, but not ashamed. "I get it now," he said. "Doors don't apologize for being locked. They keep a home a home." We finished the hedge line in an easy rhythm, passing tools like trust back and forth. He carried the ladder, and I steadied it, the way he once did for me. The role reversal felt right, like a river finding its deeper channel. When we put the tools away, he squeezed my shoulder. "Thank you for not quitting on me," he said. "Thank you for not making me soft," I replied. He moved into a small apartment in town, took a job at the mechanic's shop, and started showing up for his own life. Paychecks were modest. Sobriety was expensive and worth it. He went to meetings, brought a notebook, and learned the names of men who refused to lie to themselves. Therapy felt strange at first, like using a new wrench, then satisfying when the bolt finally loosened. On Sundays, he drove out to the ranch, changed the oil in the tractor, and stayed for supper. We didn't post any of it. We didn't need likes to confirm what the Oaks already knew. A man can grow without an audience. He spoke more slowly, apologized without a comma, and laughed from the belly again. He didn't ask about the keys. He didn't need to. One evening as he left, he said, "I'm proud of the work I did today." "Me too," I said, and meant both of us. I saw her again this time. Outside a hotel, ribbon-cutting cameras catching everything but the ache. She sparkled, new dress, new ring, the same careful smile. "The ranch looks good," she said. "You're still there." "I am," I answered and let the silence finish the sentence. Her driver opened the door. She glanced at the photographers, then at me, then at the space between us, where a life used to be argued. I felt no heat rise, no speech gather. I felt steady the way stone fences feel steady after winter. "Take care of the boy," I said. She nodded, quick surprised, maybe at my tone, maybe at her own reflection in it. When the car pulled away, dust lifted and fell. I went home to the porch, brewed tea, and watched evening take its time. Some stories end with trumpets. Mine ended with a quiet click of a latch that finally fit. I was exactly where I belonged. I'm 62 now, and the porch keeps time better than any clock. The adobe walls hold the day's warmth. The old trees lean in like witnesses. Out in the yard, a little boy with my last name chases chickens and laughs at their fuss. By the fence, his father sets a post plumb and true. This is the picture I fought for, not to win, but to keep what makes us ourselves. I used to think the keys around my neck were just metal and memory. Now I know they're a promise. I am not clinging to the past. I am protecting the future. Peace is priceless, and it lives in ordinary work, in clean dishes, in a door that clicks softly at dusk. If you've ever chosen boundaries over approval, you already understand the ending. The land is steady. My heart is too. If this story touched you, share it and tell me your story in the comments. Someone out there needs your words to hold on tonight.